We're going to be talking about the fact that Kamala Harris unveiled the agenda. One of the most pressing issues that I think is a top of mind, right, for a lot of Americans, young, old, everyone. It is the affordability crisis that everyone is experiencing, both in housing and in just all consumer goods across the board. And I don't find it odd that the media immediately started launching attacks, because that's what they do. They're in the pocket of big corporations at the end of the day. They're in a bind because they hate Donald Trump for volatility. And also Donald Trump has a lot of economic policy points that will harm big corporate donors as well, like instituting major tariffs and stuff, specifically on Chinese goods. So that's already something that a lot of people are worried about. But on the other hand, I think the Kamala team is also using this advantage to be like, no, this is the real way that we're going to solve the affordability crisis. We're going to go after price gougers. And of course, the media immediately, as soon as they show like a level of sanity in their policy making, in their agenda, the media has to be like, whoa, 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 you can't do that. That's communism. What's the reason she can't do things with Biden right now? Great question. I don't know if you know this, but she's running for president currently. There are certain things that she could do. I think foreign policy wise, there's definitely certain aspects of her agenda that she could communicate across the Biden's team and Biden's camp on foreign policy. As far as like instituting more power to the FTC under the Biden regime is probably going to be too difficult to pull off, while also simultaneously running for president. Now, before people say, oh, she doesn't have Congress, a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is not limited by congressional approval. So just so you understand, so she could technically do it if Biden wanted to do it. But I don't think that there is any enough momentum at this moment. Didn't the court say they won't let that stuff happen? Yeah, okay. Well, you know, I have an answer for that. It's called who gives a f. Okay.
On so many issues, including to expand access to affordable health care than Joe Biden.
The president touting the first ever negotiations with pharmaceutical companies to lower the cost of 10 drugs.
Kamala and all of us in this room, we're going to keep standing up for big pharma. I fought too hard to yield now.
The VP does not have unilateral decision-making power. They have influencing power. Exactly. 100%. And like she is already currently with this agenda, with this economic agenda, she's already personally saying that they're going to continue what they've done so far in the Brandon regime with respect to the FTC, with respect to Lena Khan. That's actually a really solid thing. For the record, I do think this is good. I will always be honest with you. When I see the Democrats doing something good, I will tell you, okay? I think that personally, running alongside Brandon like this, not the greatest thing, okay? But that's fine. It's okay. Biden has also made bold proclamations, even when he was running as well. He's made bold proclamations about what he wants to do with the economy. So I think the Kamala campaign is basically continuing that agenda. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a very good thing, okay?
Her campaign says Harris will propose up to $25,000 in down payment support for first-time home buyers who have paid their rent on time for 2 years. Expand the child tax credit, providing up to $6,000 per child, and implement a first-ever federal ban on price gouging on food and groceries. I can only get
so hard. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is great stuff, Chad. I'm not joking when I say this. Like, I was actually shocked when Biden was talking about a federal cap, like federal rent control. That's an insane policy. Like, that's not something that you hear from the Democrats a lot. Biden originally instituted some kind of rent control that was like super, super limited. Okay. Then he turned around and said, we're going to try to push for a federal rent control across the board and we're going to limit it at 5%. That was also pretty fire. Every time they were like, bro, you're old, he would just come out and be like, I'm going to do another progressive populist policy. Every time they would be like, you're old, please leave. He'd be like, I'm doing socialism, Jack. Phenomenal message, worst messenger. I kept saying that back then, and I will repeat that now. Not the worst messenger, and the message is great. I will give credit where credit is due.
She wants price controls, and if they worked, I'd go along with it too, but they don't work.
The former president speaking at his golf club in New Jersey, surrounded by groceries, for a press conference his advisors said would focus on the economy.
We're going to have a crash like a 1929 crash if she gets in.
Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, accusing Trump of rooting for economic catastrophe.
There is nothing funnier. Democrats literally lie every 4 years about what they will say will happen. What makes you think she isn't lying about literally everything she's saying? You're not wrong about this. Democrats have consistently lied about what they're going to end up doing. The difference in this circumstance is that you have to pay attention to what they're lying about and what they've done so far. on the issue of the economy, the Biden administration has actually pursued through the federal regulatory bodies a pretty radical agenda. That's not a joke. That's not a lie. That is real. That is something that they did. But more importantly than that, Democrats ultimately never make proclamations of this sort. This is new. They do radical proclamations when it comes to like, oh, we're going to do amnesty, which is weirdly enough an area where they're actually retriangulating to the right. And I don't like that. So in a weird way, it's been a complete swap. On the one hand, they literally are pushing for economic policies that they don't openly state ever, things that are like that will immediately be considered like communist, socialist, radical, crazy by the Republicans that they shy away from usually. But on the other hand, they've completely swapped the ticket on stuff like, protections for immigrants, protections for migrants and things of that nature. They've actually shifted on that entirely. You say that this is the first time you remember Dems fighting, right? Well, Kamala is the first admin since 1992 that doesn't have Clinton advisors for economic and foreign policy. She'll turn them down, they asked. This is the shift, in my opinion. Yeah, this is for the Democratic Party. If we are looking at this with respect to like what the Democrats have put forward, usually this is one of the boldest agendas that I've ever seen. And something that's really interesting about the way that they're communicating this agenda is that they're not like, one thing that Kamala Harris said that I found very interesting was, if I win the Senate, we'll do this, right? She didn't just say, oh, we're going to do this when you elect me. She literally has said, once I win the Senate, like once we win Congress and the White House, we will pass this. So that's a really interesting way to message. That's number one. Number two, a lot of the policies that she's talking about, some of the policies that she's talking about does not require congressional power. Some of the things that she's talking about are directly done through the federal regulatory agencies, which she would have control over. So that is actually really solid. Mentioning congressional support also adds a cushion for failure. It's also honest. And I don't know why they don't do that more frequently, because it's good to also mention that you need congressional approval in this situation. And I think it helps the down ballot chances. There are obviously Senate races on the same ballot. There are House races on the same ballot that could tilt in the direction of the Democratic Party's control over both the House of Representatives and the Senate and the White House. So that's like a good thing that I think you should be communicating overall. Here's some of the top of the line things that she unveiled. $6,000 child tax credit for newborns in the first year. Major. Restore Biden's child tax credit. Up to $3,600 monthly checks. Incredible stuff. Up to $25,000 in government assistance for first-time buyers with, I think, like perfect renters credit. That's also pretty solid. Universal $35 insulin cap, which was already like a continuation of the former. Like a lot of this stuff is a continuation of Biden's policies, right? Universal $35 cap is an extension. Like it builds on the prior momentum on this sort. $2,000 out-of-pocket cap for pharmaceutical drugs. Incredible work. Other provisions include federal ban on price gouging. This is the one I like a lot, okay? For food and groceries, providing FTC new power to penalize companies. That's major. There was a lot of talk. There was a lot of back and forth among Democratic donors that would go on CNN and say, we want Lena Khan out. Lena Khan has been doing phenomenal work in trust busting at the FTC. She is a shining star that is only there because of Biden's responsiveness to his left flank. All of this are pretty good signs for the future. If Biden has so many good policies, why didn't he use them as talking points during his campaign? Great question. I think the answer is he was so old and so decrepit. That's it. Like that's literally it. I would cringe sometimes when he would say the good policies because I was like, he's the worst person. He is the worst messenger for even good economic populist policies. He just kept going, NATO. That's what he cared about. That's what he remembered. Is price gouging just raising prices? How is it measured? I'm not for this. I just don't understand how you determine if a company has gouged or not. Great question. So price gouging is something that a lot of people understand when it's like times of crisis, right? In a natural disaster zone, for example, all of a sudden people that are selling life-saving supplies or things that are absolute necessities will hike up the prices because there's obviously additional extra demand and limited supply. So they will turn around and just be like, oh yeah, you want toilet paper? It's gonna be $15. This is, I believe is technically illegal if I'm not mistaken. The thing is, a lot of corporations across the board in the post-COVID universe have done that, have done that for consumer goods in general. You could take a look at it. You can see how much prices have gone up overall and how much other prices have adjusted post-COVID, right? Or like post-logistical hurdles, post-energy crisis. Like there were many different moments where prices have obviously understandably gone up as a consequence of the price of a barrel of gas going up. That increases the prices for everything. It is technically still arbitrary, but you know, this is one of the greatest examples of it. All right. High egg prices and profits at largest U.S. producer soaring more than 700%. For example, egg prices rose 60% last year. This was a major issue. March 29th, 2023. Everybody kept saying, oh, it's because of the avian flu. It's because of the avian flu. Except the major producers of eggs actually weren't even hit by the avian flu. They just jacked up prices because everybody was like, oh, it's the avian flu. They had 0 instances of avian flu and they still jacked up the prices. That is a great example of price gouging in general. Companies taking advantage of the confusion and the chaos and just hiking up prices in general. Why don't they just target monopoly instead of price gouging? What do you think Lena Khan is doing? That's so weird. You just said Lena Khan goat, Lena Khan goat, Lena Khan goat. That's precisely what she's been doing as well. Yeah, landlords raising rent because of market conditions too. That's exactly what it is. Using any and every reason to hike up prices when you don't have any supply issues is precisely what price gouging is. So there's other cool in there, obviously. The EITC expanding that as the earned income tax credit. Working with states to cancel medical debt is a huge one. That's really popular, is really solid in general. Extending ACA subsidies, that's fine. I think that what they should be doing is also expanding Medicare in general. That was a Bernie policy. It's like literally the most popular out of all the policies that Bernie Sanders actually tested. When the latest Data for Progress poll, the latest Data for Progress study that came out, that showed that was polling at like an 80% approval rating or something. Like putting dental vision care on Medicare is like insanely popular with a constituency that actually reliably votes. We're talking about, you know, obviously 65 and over. These are people that do vote reliably. These are people that love their health care. They love their health insurance. So it's a really solid way to sneak in Medicare expansion in general, lower the age of Medicare to 55 maybe, you know, and slowly but surely you arrive at Medicare for all. Who knows? So there's that. Clever way to think about what's happening on CTC, child tax credit. The next question is, how does Harris pay for these initiatives? The temporary Biden CTC alone was $1.4 trillion or so over 10 years, and a blanket extension of ACA subsidies is $270 billion over a decade. There are also some supply side initiatives for home building. I think expanding on 3 million homes, like opening up the way to allow 3 million additional units to be constructed. I don't know the exact details of how that would happen. That could be a scary way in which they do it because the Republicans also have a similar policy on their agenda. That could also be a good way to do it. Matt Bruning's reaction to Harris's policy, quick reaction to Harris's policies. Matt Bruning is a good egg, obviously. Love the guy. From peoplespolicyproject.org. He is the leftist nerd, the leftist econ nerd that we need. Kamala Harris unveiled many campaign policy proposals today. Jeff Stein and Dan Diamond have covered it at the Washington Post. Below are reactions to some of these proposals. $25K for first-time home buyers. This is a bad idea. It is unfair to people who, even with the subsidy, cannot afford to buy a home, or those who prefer to rent, because there's a demand subsidy without any corresponding price controls. Some of the money will just get captured as higher home prices, negating the affordability goals of the policy. Not an unfair take. It is not an unfair take at all. I think it's a true take. That one is... These are not the strongest ones. The ones I care about is this, okay? But he says it is unclear what this even means. In a New York Times article about it, Jim Tankersley writes, Harris campaign officials did not detail how a price gouging ban would be enforced or what current corporate behaviors would be outlawed if it were enacted. It is already illegal for producers to coordinate so as to fixing prices, something Harris also separately said she plans to tackle through harsher penalties. Price gouging is something different than that, but it also seems sometimes to be used to refer to a very narrow set of practices like increasing the prices the day after a hurricane, while other times being used to refer to any time sellers increase prices during a positive demand shock or a negative supply shock, which is kind of how a lot of the economy works. When restaurants increase prices after happy hour, are they engaged in food price gouging? A better idea would be for the federal government to spend about $45 billion to purchase Kroger. This will allow it to directly set the price for the second largest grocery store chain in the country. He's not wrong. I mean, but this is a bit of a meme. He's not wrong. This would be the most effective way of like out-competing. This would be the most effective way of out-competing everybody else. He's right about this, except that would, I think, terrify people. I wish they would do it though. That would be great. Capping out-of-pocket spending on drugs at $2,000. This is a good idea, assuming it's well designed. Read David Trimmer on it here. $6K tax credit for newborns. This is basically a good idea. It's sometimes called a baby bonus or maternity grant. Ideally, you would not design this as a tax credit, but instead a straightforward cash grant paid out by Social Security Administration. In other countries, maternity grants like this are even provided a couple months before birth so the money can be used for various baby-related items. Paying it out as a tax credit generally means parents won't be able to access it until early parts of the year after they give birth, assuming they file for taxes, which the poorest parents do not do. 3K child tax credit. The current child tax credit is $2,000 per child. It has a phase-in that includes the poorest kids and a phase-out that excludes the richest kids. It is paid out in a lump sum at the end of the year. For 1 year in 2021, the child tax credit was $3,000 per child, had no phase-in, and was paid out monthly. This basic idea of this was good, but the execution of it as an IRS-administered monthly advance refundable tax credit was bad. Among other things, it caused poor people to not get the benefit, as I wrote about extensively in 2021. A better idea would have the Social Security Administration pay a monthly cash benefit to every child. I don't disagree with that either. Increased subsidies for individual health insurance plans. It is hard to assess this idea without first observing the entire structure of how we do health insurance is so unbelievably awful that all anyone should want to do is completely overhaul it. I 100% agree with that. But it seems like Democrats basically are content with gradually adding more and more subsidies to help a relatively small percentage of the population who buy insurance plans from the individual exchanges. It's fine. Nationalizing grocery stores is a good idea to expose Americans to. I cannot begin to admit how much I agree with that sentiment. I am telling you right now, there are already mechanisms in play that are investigating Kroger and many other Amazon and many other grocery chains in terms of like increasing prices artificially, utilizing the additional level of utilizing all of the extra information that you have, like the McDonald's app. This is all already happening. This is many invisible ways in which people don't even recognize that you're being gouged. It is crazy. Like these applications like Uber already do it. Like, for example, I'm willing to bet that someone who obviously has, no reason not to care about like price hikes on Uber in like times of need, surge pricing, for example, I'm not even looking at it. I'm clicking go, right? So Uber knows that. So they serve me higher prices no matter what. And not from like Uber Black versus Uber X. I mean, straight up, my Uber X is probably on average more expensive than your Uber X on average, even if we lived in the same neighborhood and even if we used Uber at the same time. There's an algorithm on the back end that literally looks at the likelihood that you will pay more and then serves you higher prices every time. As it stands, a lot of corporations utilize all of the cookies and all of the information that your phone is feeding these applications. As more and more of our shopping turns online, as more and more of our shopping is conducted over our phones that captures every minute detail of your daily existence, these applications engage in what is known as dynamic pricing. At first, it makes it seem like it's a way to offer cheaper goods, okay? But the reality down the line is that they will figure out exactly when you are more likely to buy and they'll pump you. They will increase your prices. Okay, here it is. David Dayen wrote extensively on this. Yes, this is exactly what I was referencing. One person, one price. Digital surveillance and customer isolation are individualizing the prices we pay. Uber is also locking drivers out of the app during certain times to increase the demand artificially, thereby increasing the prices. So ridiculous and insane and harmful to the drivers as well as those who work these hours to make their money. It's corporations determining your propensity to consume the goods / product and maximizing how much profit they can extract out of you without turning you away. Is there something we could do to avoid dynamic pricing? Yes. The administration, if you make a large enough stink about it, will use mechanisms that already are in place from the FTC to put an end to it.